Background on PolicyMap. So PolicyMap is a nationwide online mapping and data platform. So we combine indicators across a number of different data sources from both public data sources, so demographic and income and poverty data coming from the census, health data from CDC, there's lots of other kind of federal data sources from federal agencies that are releasing and updating these data sets on an ongoing basis, as well as some proprietary data that we license on topics like residential and business vacancy, some home sale data, some data on school performance, and we combine these data sources into an easy to use mapping and reporting tool. So providing kind of a GIS, geographic information solutions type of tool for non-GIS specialists. So as we get into the demonstration, you'll see the data covers demographics, income, housing, jobs, health, education, as well as other kind of topic areas. And what I understand from talking to Kim, there's folks who are doing work in economic development, community development, housing, also interested in health and social determinants of health and kind of that intersection. So I think there's going to be lots of data sets kind of across the platform that should have some pretty broad appeal to the group. So uses of PolicyMap include research, business planning and site selection, market studies, grant applications, overall impact analysis, data visualization. We work with lots of government agencies, state and local government, a little bit of federal government. Universities are big users of PolicyMap for research as well as for curriculum and coursework. Nonprofit organizations, community development, financial institutions, and then also some customers in sort of the public health world. So we are a benefit corporation and a small business located in Philadelphia, and we actually started in 2008 as part of a CDFI, kind of like a nonprofit bank based in Philadelphia, originally as an internal tool to be able to understand neighborhoods where they were doing their work and talk about their impact, and eventually kind of spun off from there. So that's a little bit of the background on kind of who PolicyMap is for anybody who's less familiar. For the overview, I'm going to start with basic functionality overall, just kind of site navigation, talk about some of the data that's available, try and highlight some of the ones that would be of particular interest to Bloomington. And then we'll get into some more of the advanced features using custom regions. We have a self-service data uploader for uploading address level data and using the geocoder to do that, and multi-layer mapping. So try to leave the last 5-10 minutes at the end for kind of a Q&A session as well. So PolicyMap is a web-based tool, so you can access it from any computer with internet access. So you would just go to policymap.com. That would bring you to our landing page here. You can either go right into the map, clicking on Open Map, and then log in from the Maps page, or log in from this landing page here. There is a forgot password link to reset your password if you forget it. So when you log in, the default view is going to be this full view of the United States. You'll see notifications up here, this little kind of alarm notification section, which will just let you know of like recent data updates and things along those lines. So you may occasionally see those. In terms of support resources, up in the top right-hand corner, there is a link to our support page. So if you click on that, we have a number of tutorials and guides on our support page for the various features and functionality, creating maps, using the multi-layer mapping. We also have a video gallery with just like a 3-4 minute quick start video, as well as an overview of kind of the new PolicyMap, which is at this point kind of about a year old in terms of our new platform, but that's primarily what we're going to be looking at during this demonstration. This is also searchable, so if you're like working with custom regions and wanted to see the different posts related to custom regions, you can do keyword searches in there and then select something and look at a particular guide on that section. There's also a what's new section, which just highlights new and updated features as they're added to the tool, as well as new and updated data. So we'll, when we update data sources or we add new data, we'll keep kind of a running feed of those things here on this section. There's also just a contact us button here. So general support questions, you can either use this. You could also use we just have a support@policymap.com email address, which a couple of my colleagues monitor. So in terms of general just kind of navigation, you can, pan around on the map. You can use the scroll wheel or the plus and minus signs in the bottom right-hand corner to zoom. And as you navigate, you'll, start to see additional base map details start to populate. To set a location, so one of the kind of core pieces of functionality in PolicyMap is this location search, where you can put in a specific address or like a city, a county, to zoom to a particular location or place on the map. So if you were to type in Bloomington, the results are ordered by population size, but so you would see Bloomington as this third one down. Once you select it, it will zoom to that selected location. So we'll see kind of the boundary for City of Bloomington, and then as I continue to zoom in, some more of this base map detail will populate. So this location search can also work as has some sort of built-in boundaries. So if you select this drop down, like if you needed to navigate to a particular census tract or block group and you had the ID for it, you could select one of these, put in the ID and navigate to it. There's also some built-in like school districts, political, state legislative districts, also available in this drop down. So you can zoom in really closely on the map, and as you zoom in, you'll start to see additional detail populate, eventually starting to see, building footprints and these smaller streets and some other landmarks. We do have in the bottom right-hand corner, if you were kind of interested in kind of creating a different type of visualization, there's this 3D button to adjust sort of the angle of your view. So you could change this to kind of more of that bird's eye view type of visualization, add data on the map. So that's something you can check out. If you wanted to reset it back up to the overhead view, just click on this reset button. And then a couple more options in terms of the base map. In the bottom right-hand corner is a little gear icon for base map settings. So you can there's 4 different base map options. There's the standard one, there's a grayscale option, there is a terrain map, and then there's also a satellite imagery base map. So you can kind of select from those 4 different options. And within each of the base maps, so if I go back to the standard base map, within each of the base maps, there's also different features and layers to the base map that you can turn on and off. So you can turn on, turn off the building footprints or turn, off road labels. So you can toggle these different options on and off to change what you're looking at on the base map. There's also within the base map, we also do have a layer for some transit, information. So there's some rail lines and stations. There's some bus routes and bus line information on here. And once you zoom in kind of close, you can start to see some of the line information in there. So that's another kind of just like, again, like base map layer that you could turn on in terms of just sort of showing that visualization. So all of the other kind of like data, so data layers, indicators, data points that are available from the PolicyMap data library are going to be organized into these data menus across the top of the map, from demographics over to analytics. That's kind of all of the data that we update and maintain on an ongoing basis. And so everything is grouped by theme rather than by source to help it make it easy to find what you're looking for. So as you scroll through these or scan through these menus, you'll see kind of these groupings of indicators, and they kind of get into more and more sort of specific families or specific sort of indicator layers that you can then select from the menu to add that onto the map. So they kind of cascade out into more and more kind of specific indicator groupings. So in terms of just sort of some highlights, there's The demographics menu is going to have obviously a lot of the data from the census on different demographics, race and ethnicity, population with disabilities, different household and family type indicators. The incomes and spending menu is going to have indicators on household income, low and moderate income populations, poverty indicators. The housing menu has some point level data sets on subsidized housing locations, affordable housing locations, as well as some home sale activity, data on homeowners and renters, lots of kind of more specific kind of disaggregations there by race, by age. We also have some housing affordability and cost burden indicators. And then we have some data on vacancy as well, residential and business vacancy. And this is one of those data sources that we license from a source called Velasas Lists. Our lending menu has some data on small business loans, so actual locations of small business loans, some locations of lending institutions like bank branches and credit unions. The quality of life menu has grocery stores and farmers markets and SNAP, EBT, retail food locations. There's also locations of parks, lots of kind of interesting data that we've somewhat recently added from an EPA smart location database on things like walkability and some transportation infrastructure type of indicators. There's also some data from FEMA on flood risk. The economy menu has lots of data on jobs, jobs per households, some employment density types of indicators. And the education menu has things like school locations, as well as educational attainment and some school district statistics. And then the health menu has some data on different health facilities, community health centers, as well as some data on like underlying risk factors, health conditions, access to medical care costs and insurance availability. So, and then the federal guidelines has lots of data on like place-based designations. So, lots of things related to CDFI work, but there's also things like CDBG eligibility in here as well. And then these data menus are searchable. So, if you were looking to, you could do keyword searches right here in this data search to pull up, a particular data layer or data point. Just hit the back button there by accident. To pull up something that you might be looking for. So if you were to put in like median household income, you can select that from the search results, and then it will display that data on the map, in this case, a data layer. So if you needed to remove a data layer from the map, you can click on this X. You'll also see a similar one if you have data points loaded on the map. So I'll go ahead and just load an example of a data layer, kind of walk through sort of some of the different documentation, how to interact with that data layer, and do the same thing with data points just to kind of show some of that. So let's say we wanted to look at a indicator on renters by age, navigate through the menu here and look at renter households 65 and older. So this would be anytime you have a data layer displayed on the map, over in the legend, you'll see a label or kind of a short description. So it's telling you that this is estimated percent of householders 65 or older who rent a home. If you click on the little eye bubble here, you can see a little bit more description for the particular layer that you're looking at. And then you can either click here to access our data dictionary, or from the legend itself, you'll see this source saying that this comes from the census, and this hyperlink will actually take you to our data dictionary page, where it'll navigate you to the particular source that indicator comes from. And then here you can see some of the details on that data source, what years are available for that data source, what geographies it's available for, the last time it was updated, and then any kind of description about kind of how we work with that data or process that data to incorporate it into PolicyMap. So when you have a data layer on the map, and if you're moving your mouse around, you'll see this hover will tell you, the underlying, value in this case for it's shading this data at the block group level. So it's telling me, the estimated percent of households that are 65 or older who rent a home are within a given block group based off of, where my mouse is located. You can, if I zoom out just a little bit, just to sort of for showing this, you can also, over here in the legend, you'll see, when you're hovering, that it will kind of do a light gray shading, kind of telling you which of these ranges the area that you're hovering over falls within. This is all interactive too, so if you wanted to, just see those census tracts that fall within these top two ranges, you can select over there in the legend within that selection of ranges, and then it'll kind of hide everything else and just show you those areas that are in the top two ranges. And you can remove those selections by clicking on the X's to bring everything back onto the map. So then if you wanted to see more information about a selected location, so let's say we clicked on this particular census tract, kind of the north of this downtown area that has a high percent of households 65 or older who rent a home. So when you click on the area, you'll see that it's now highlighted, showing that you've selected it, and then it'll tell you, it'll give you this, kind of little quick trend chart view where you can see some change over time for that selected boundary and how this, indicator has changed over time for the timeframes that are available. And then you can click on this trends button from the pop-up to open up a sidebar on the right-hand side, which will give you some benchmark information so you can see how this, small census tract area compares to the city of Bloomington, the county, the metro area, so you can kind of do some of that comparison. And then these trend charts are also all, interactive over here in this little preview, and you can either click on one of the trend charts or click on this see chart with listed locations button at the top to open up kind of a bigger trend chart view. And then you can add some of those boundaries in. So if you wanted to add, the census tract relative to the city of Bloomington, you can add those in, add maybe the county in as well. You can turn on and off different labels and, leader lines and things like that. And then this is just something that you can export as an image out of the tool by clicking on the export button. And then similarly, you can also look at neighbors. So if you wanted to kind of switch from looking at your benchmark, your hierarchy kind of boundaries to just neighboring boundaries, you can click on that selection there, and it'll, in this case, kind of show you the neighboring census tracts to the one that you clicked on, and what the value is for that particular indicator for those neighboring tract areas. So if you wanted to collapse this sidebar panel, you can just click on that little button on the side of it. So a couple of other elements in terms of interacting with the data layer and the legend. So in the legend, you can use these different drop downs to change what you're looking at on the map. So if you wanted to remove that selected census tract, if you wanted to look at a prior time frame, you can select the year drop down and just select to go back to, keep this same indicator, but look at a prior time frame. You can do that. You can also change your variable from the default in this case of, the percent of households 65 and older who rent to an estimated count or a percent change variable. And then if you want to change your colors, you can choose a different color ramp. You can also invert the color ramp. So if you're kind of, interested in, areas that had low, percent of population 65 and older that own a home, you can kind of invert it, flip that around using that invert colors button there within the color ramps. And then you can also adjust your ranges. So kind of the cut points of how these ranges within the legend are organized by clicking on this ranges drop down. You can change the number, and then you can also actually just sort of use these sliders to move around kind of your, the actual specific comp points associated with each range. So if you wanted to have this top one be where it's greater than 50% or something like that, you can slide that, or just actually edit the numbers directly by clicking on them there. You can always just restore the defaults by clicking on the restore defaults button. And then there's also a boundary lock here, or kind of a, you'll see this shaded by dropdown, and that'll tell you based off of your zoom level how the data layer is shading on the map. So it's shading it at census tract level right now. If you do zoom in closer and the data is available at smaller geographies, it will just dynamically switch to shade at a smaller geographic boundary. But you can also lock to a selected geography using the little lock icon, and then it will kind of just stick with that shading regardless of your zoom level. So then if we wanted to add a data point on the map or a point data set on the map, I'll put on locations of low-income housing tax credit properties. So we can kind of see, some affordable rental housing locations relative to our older renting populations. And so when you have a data point on the map, you'll see it's going to show actual point locations. And if you hover over a particular point, you can see, in this case, like a project name. If you click on a particular point, then you'll be able to see the attributes for that selected point location. So you can expand these menus, collapse them to see the different attributes that are associated with these different LIHTC property locations. And then you can change some of the visual components when you have a point data set on the map. So you can change your icon size, color, and shape. And then you can also use filters with lots of the point data in PolicyMap. So within the point legend, you'll see this filter button, or kind of this filter menu. And the filters are, obviously going to depend on what attributes are available from the particular point data set that you're looking at. But if you expand these, these are again going to be expandable menus where you can look at, something like year 30, kind of, the year basically in which the particular property could expire from the LIHTC program. So if you wanted to look at, those that are expiring in the next 10 years, you could choose those particular filter options. Then what you'll be seeing on the map will be like a subset of your LIHTC properties, just those that have year 30 dates in the next 10 years. You can remove those selections by clicking on those X's. And then in a lot of cases, you can also keep all the points on the map, but color code them based off of a selected filter. So in this case now, it's going to color code them based off of the filter group. You'll see over here in the legend, how that color coding is represented. So again, if you wanted to remove anything from your map, or you can move these elements around on the map, and you can temporarily kind of minimize them and expand them. You can also remove the data points or the data layers by clicking on these X's here. And you can also reset your map just to kind of that default view using this reset map button in the bottom right hand corner. There's also some boundaries that you can overlay on top of a data layer and data points that you've added to your map up here in this boundaries menu. So you can put on, zip code boundaries as an overlay on top of your data. You can change the line, weight, style, color. But so you'll see kind of these zip code boundaries that are overlaid on top. And then you can also turn on and off the different, the labels for those boundaries as well, or temporarily just kind of hide them using this eyeball icon. So I'm going to come back to the sidebar functionality and put Bloomington back in as my selected location from the set location bar at the top. That wrong, Bloomington. Just to come back to a couple of these buttons up here when you navigate to a selected location and you have data on the map. So when you select a location and you do have data on the map, you can use some of these buttons. You know, in the case of this scissor icon, you can clip your map to just show those areas that fall within your selected location. You can also use the table button here to, kind of dig into the data that falls within that selected location. So if we wanted to see, the 42 block groups that fall within the city boundary and what the estimated, percent of households 65 and older who rent within each of those block groups is, you can use this table function to do that. Similarly, you can toggle over to see the list of points that fall within that selected location. So the LIHTC properties that fall within the city boundary. And as you kind of hover over the list, you'll see over on the map that it's showing you the locations of the one that you're hovering over. And then you can download this data too. So if you just tab over to this download button, you can either download your data layer, your data points, or you can do this third option, which is downloading the points with the layer data attached to it. So that would be essentially kind of like a spatial join for anybody who's used GIS, where you could download the points and then have each point kind of stamped with the indicator based off of like the block group or census tract or however you have it shaded that the point falls within. So you would select an option, just click on download data. There's also a download in terms of just downloading data out of PolicyMap. There's also a download data kind of modal. So up here in the top right-hand corner, this button will open up our data downloader. And with that, you just don't have to create a map. You could just basically search within the data menus and just kind of select a particular data, particular indicator, and then just sort of determine a location and download it. So rather than creating the map first, that's kind of another way to get the data out of the tool. So in addition to downloading the data, you can also export the map image by using this print button in the bottom right. So there's a couple of other outputs here that you can produce. The print, there's a save, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about them. But the print button will open up a print preview. You can, pan this around. You can move these legends around in your print preview. You can zoom in and out. Give it a different file name. Change your orientation. So there's lots of different options here. You can also edit the actual title in here. Turn on and off the different legends. And so once you've gone through, selected all of your options, just click on the export button. You can export either as PDF or as a PNG, which would just be an image. So that would be great for, if you're wanting to incorporate a map into a document or presentation or something like that. And so once you click on the export button, it will just be another thing that generates through your browser. And it'll just kind of pop up through your browser and be available in your local downloads. And then the save and the save workspace. So if you create a map and you want to save it, be able to come back to it, you can use this save icon right below the print. So the save will, you can give it a unique name. You can then save it into your workspace, which you can always come back to by just clicking on that View Saved Workspace button right below. That'll open up your saved work, and then you can, if you were to come back in like in another session, you could come back in here and select from your saved maps just to kind of come right back to that, particular zoom level with that data layer on the map with that data point on the map. So it'll kind of save everything about your current map view. And then you can also, you'll see there's other elements that you can save and that you can access from your saved workspace too. So I'm going to clear my map just to get into a couple of the other features. So the next thing, and there's the printed map, which just generated through my local browser. So the next thing I would talk about is custom regions and using custom regions. And so custom regions allow you to basically kind of create like your own study area of interest. And then once you've created that custom region, you can share it with others. You can, and then you can also use that custom region for, clipping your map, downloading data, and also just kind of generating some of the just sort of standard reports that are available in PolicyMap. So you'll see up in the top right, so just to the right of the location search is this button, which has this custom regions tooltip. So if you click on the custom regions button, the first tab will show you any regions that you have created previously. And you can load anything that you've created previously back up on the map by selecting it from your list of regions. You can also click on the edit, this pencil button to go and edit it or share it. If you wanted to create a new region, you can click on that second tab. And so you'll see these three options. You can either draw directly on the map to create a region. You could assemble some census tracts, some zip codes to assemble a region based off some underlying boundaries, or you can use this radius region option, which will allow you to put in a location and set a circular radius around it. So I'm going to use the radius region option here, and let's say that we were kind of focusing on a particular intersection or something along those lines. And so I'll click on this somewhat looks like a fairly large intersection in North Bloomington. And so you can click on the map or put in actual search for a location. Then you can specify your radius distance here. I'll set it to 1 mile. And I'll click on continue, and then you can give it a name and a description if you want. Also change some things about the transparency, the fill, the color. And then you can save this, and then now it will be in that list of saved regions when you go back to the custom region menu. So if I click on this plus sign just to open this up, you can go back and edit this. So if I wanted to change my radius distance or my center point or anything like that, you can come back and edit your shape. Just click on continue and save to save those changes that you've made. You can also edit some of the visual components of it. And then you can also share these, as I mentioned. So if you wanted to share with a particular colleague, you can just put in an email address and they'll just get an email notification letting them know that they now have access to it and they would see it in their custom regions menu. So then we can add some data on the map just to kind of demonstrate, how you can use it. So, let's say we wanted to look at, we're interested in some of the small businesses that are located within this radius region. You could use, some of the small business loan data that we have in PolicyMap to get an idea of some of the small business locations that are within that radius region. So I'll use some SBA loan data. So there we do have some PPP loan data. There's a couple of different data sets here, but I'll just use PPP. And so you could, filter this down to a subset within the point data, or if you were just kind of interested broadly in, basically, small business locations that, receive some PPP funding that are included in this point data set, then when you have your custom region on the map with that data, you can click on this table button, and similarly, it will open up that sidebar and show you, in this case, the 57 small businesses in that radius region that receive PPP funding. You can download this list out of PolicyMap. And similarly, if you're just interested in, something like, an income or poverty indicator, or we're interested in something like, business vacancy rates within this location, you can use the table with that custom region on the maps again to to actually see, in this case, the the block groups that fall within that radius region and what the estimated percent of businesses that had vacancy as of that time frame were within that radius area. There's also some just sort of standard reports that you can generate out of PolicyMap. So the reports button from the custom region menu, you can see there's you can either access these from kind of like the custom region menu here, or if you use a predefined boundary or set a location through the set location bar, you can similarly access these, or just go right directly to the reports page using this reports button in the top right hand corner. But the community profile is probably the most heavily used, and it just has basically kind of lots of the core demographic information, household information, income information, and you can generate these for custom regions as well as I mentioned, just kind of standard census boundaries, cities, zip codes, counties. So when you generate the report, it will compile the data. In this case, the nice thing about generating one of these reports for a custom region is that it will do some of the on-the-fly aggregations of some of the underlying data. So, if you're just kind of interested in, you're doing some sort of project and want to get some baseline demographic information quickly for sort of this custom area that you've created, this is a quick way to get some of that data in one of these reports. So you'll see it'll tell you a little bit about the location, the tracks that it touches, some other boundaries that it's associated with or that it's intersects with, and then you'll see some population information showing you for the custom area what the population trends are relative to the county and the state, some demographic information on the breakdown of race and ethnicity over time and how that compares to, in this case, just a state benchmark, age. Here's some of the income information, so income, households by income bracket, and kind of on down the line. So you'll see, data on housing types and some vacancy information and tenure information. So, this is something that you can save. You can export this as a PDF by clicking on the print button. But again, it's just like a one-click kind of report to get lots of community characteristics and community context for, in this case, like a custom region like this. So I'm just going to click through to return to the map. And then in terms of the next piece I would get into is the self-service data loader. So this is going to be for uploading your own data, address level data to be displayed as points on the map. So the data loader, the self-service data loader, is currently kind of the last piece of functionality that's still just available in our legacy version of PolicyMap. So you have to upload your data in the legacy version of PolicyMap. You can actually interact with the data on the map in this current version that we've been looking at. But in terms of just doing the upload using the geocoder, that's something where you have to do that in the legacy version of PolicyMap still. So I'm going to toggle to the legacy version of the tool. You can do that by clicking on this Go to PolicyMap Legacy link at the top of the page. And so you'll see this is kind of the legacy tool, which again, primarily just being used for the data loader at this point. So that data loader tab at the top will bring you to this data loader page. And here's where you can select, either to add individual points or to upload a spreadsheet. And so I'll just show an example of a basic data set. So this data set just has pretty minimal attributes and just like I think maybe 100 or so points to it. And so as long as you have your street address, your city, state, your zip code, you should be in good shape as far as kind of running this through the geocoder. Um, so if you click on, so you have your street address. In this case, the sample data set, I have the street address, the city, state, the zip code. I also have some other attributes in here. So you can have other attributes. You can have up to 50 fields within your data set. The other limitation in terms of your upload is you can have up to 5,000 addresses within. You can upload as many batches as you'd like, but it is a limit of 5,000 addresses within a specific batch. So this is generally just kind of, again, how you would want to set up your spreadsheet. You can then save this as a CSV to load it in through the data loader. And so I'm going to use this second option to upload a spreadsheet of points and give this a name. So I'll just say Bloomington projects. And you can set this either accessible to just yourself or to select individuals and put in email addresses. And then you can change your icon shape, size, and color. You can also access different tips for setting up your spreadsheet, as well as just kind of start with a sample spreadsheet using these links from the data loader. So so let me go ahead and find that sample data file that I had set up. So the data loader or the geocoder will, basically scan through the column headers and try to identify the street address information. But you can also just kind of, select that from the list that this, field is my address field. This is my city, state, zip field. You can, as I mentioned, incorporate your other fields, your other columns into the data set as well and identify what kind of data type it is. And in this case, the loan amount, I'll just, it'll identify that as a dollar amount. So then you click on the next button and this will summarize your geocoding results. So it will tell you how many of the records in your data set were successfully geocoded. So you'll see it'll tell you that in this case, 65 of the 67 points successfully geocoded. You can sort within these columns, to identify the records that were not geocoded. So the green dot means it was geocoded. The red dot indicates that it was not matched. And then you can do on the fly just edits within your address information here to try and troubleshoot non-matches. So if I change that street number, if I add a street number here, it will try and do that automatic re-geocoding on the fly to try and find those matches. So then as long as you've kind of done all of your edits and are ready to move forward, you can click on that save and close, and then this will just show you a quick preview of those points that you've loaded on the map. And then if we go to go back to the new platform. So the data that you've loaded through the geocoder will be available through this My Data menu. And so here's that Bloomington projects data set that I just loaded. So if I select that, it will show me these points on the map. And then, if I hover over them or click on them, I can see the, the attributes for those fields that were included in my data. And so you can really kind of use this data in PolicyMap the same as you would use, the LITEC points or other point data sets that are in PolicyMap. You don't have the ability to set up your own filters currently on the data loader data sets, but otherwise you should be able to, see a list that fall within a custom region, or download those points based off a selected location, those kinds of things. So then if you ever needed to go back, if you needed to go back and make edits to that data set that you uploaded through the data loader, you could just go back to the legacy tool, go back to that data loader tab, and then you can just edit a data set that you've previously uploaded, open up the permissions for it, give it a, share it with more colleagues, as well as, if you just wanted to delete it or re-import it or add additional locations to it, you can kind of do all that by going back to the data loader tool. So I'll just do a quick run through of the multi-layer maps, and then pause and just see if there's any questions as we wrap up. So the multi-layer maps tool is available from the top right. So you'll see this single layer view and then this multi-layer view. And when you click on that, it'll kind of shade the menus purple, just kind of letting you know that you're in kind of a different side of the application. So pretty much what we've been looking at this point, up to this point, has really been within that single layer view. So you can have a single data layer on at a time. The multi-layer tool allows you to put on multiple data layers and then to set some criteria to kind of do some querying. So you can do kind of either kind of more like filtering kind of criteria or querying. So where you would kind of have a couple layers on the map and then set some criteria to see sort of locations that meet multiple criteria or kind of multiple parameters. And then there's also an overlap type of query type where you can keep all the layers on the map, but just sort of see where there is overlap or there's not overlap. So I'll go through just kind of a quick example here, and I'm going to put on a health risk indicator, lead exposure risk, as a kind of my first layer, and then look at that relative to population of color, as well as some low income population, just to kind of tell that story of kind of the health disparities related to lead exposure risk for vulnerable populations, right? So then I'll put on my first layer the lead exposure risk from the health menu. So navigate through the data menus the same way. And this is going to be under the risk factors. And so I have my first layer on the map. And right now, kind of nothing is, it's just sort of shading all the areas on the map where the data is available. So here in the legend of the multi-layer tool, you can see there's these two options. So there's the intersect and then the or. So the and query is kind of more that drill down filtering query, and then the or is more of the overlap. So I'm going to do the or option first. So then to sort of limit what I'm seeing on the map, or just to kind of hone in on selected locations, I'm going to change this criteria and just look at those census tracts with a high lead exposure risk. So I've kind of just selected the high category within that first layer from the multi-layer legend. So then what you're seeing on the map is just those areas that have a high lead exposure risk. You could add additional selections here if you wanted to, but keep it with just a high lead exposure risk. So then you could add another data layer on the map. So we'll do the population of color under the demographics, race, ethnicity, race. We'll do population of color. So this will add that second data layer on the map. It's going to have this cross-hatching symbology. But again, you would want to change your criteria to kind of, again, sort of like tell more of the story here. So you can either use the slider here to narrow down to areas that meet that second criteria for that second layer, or you can actually just kind of edit the numbers, kind of the bottom the bottom value or the top value within that selected layer. So I'm going to look at locations with more than 30% population of color. So once I've adjusted that second criteria, now what we're seeing is, where there is overlap in a location like this. So if I click on, these areas, I'll see it's a high lead exposure risk area with also 50% of the population being people of color. If I click over here where there's not overlap, this is an area where it's, more than 30% of the population is people of color, but it's not a very high lead exposure risk area. So kind of is where you can do that. Kind of quick kind of analysis of where there is some relationship across these multiple layers that you've put onto the map. So then I'll put on an income indicator. So we'll look at low and moderate income population based off of median family income in this case. So this is going to be the sort of census tract level median family income as a percent of the area. And so if we wanted to just look at those areas that are, low, moderate income, this would be where they're below 80% of the area median. And so now I have that third layer on the map, and it's going to be kind of with that opposite diagonal crosshatching. If I wanted to hide, the population of color layer temporarily, you can click on that eyeball icon over in the multi-layer maps legend. And then what you're seeing now is, basically just the, low moderate income areas, and then the lead exposure risk as the blue filled in areas. So then you can kind of look at, all three together if you wanted to turn on that second layer back on and kind of see where all of these indicators intersect. Or temporarily turn off certain ones to just kind of focus on maybe income related to lead exposure risk. So then just to quickly toggle to this and query. So if I just select, I was on the or, if I select to and, what you end up getting with the and query is really just sort of where there is that overlap. So where that overlap does exist, it'll just show you those locations. And then you can click on them, see the underlying data, and it will kind of tell you why these locations are filled in. So that's kind of the difference between those two. So so you can add up to 5 layers within the multi-layer maps tool, and then once you've added in these data layers, then you can print these, export these map images by clicking on this print button here, and it will save, kind of maintain your criteria from your layers that you have displayed on the map over here in the legend, so that you can see why these areas are filled in. You can add a title or description to also provide some context there too. So does anybody have any questions? I know it's a lot to cover within a single hour, but with these last few minutes, does anybody have any questions that I can answer? I'm just going to pull up the Teams just in case anybody types anything in.
I do have one question, and thank you for that, by the way. Especially the part is very cool. So one thing I'm thinking of is like the low-income housing tax credits. It was one of the examples you gave, and the data set stopped at 2019. If we happen to have, we're looking at that, and we happen to have knowledge that something was approved last year or this year, how often does that get updated? Do we have a way to just sort of combo your map with a custom without doing a whole separate layer? Is there a way to that kind of thing?
So yeah, so that's a good example, because in the case of like the LIHTC data, we we get the data from HUD, so we use HUD's data to update what's available in PolicyMap, because that's kind of like the full data set for the nation. So there's typically kind of like a lag with what you can kind of quickly access or see in PolicyMap, and then what even maybe from like a state level source or something like that there might be in terms of LIHTC project data. So we updated annually, usually in the summertime, And but in terms of like a particular project that you might have knowledge of, there's not necessarily a way to kind of like supplement that data set that we have in PolicyMap with like an individual point or a couple of additional projects. It would be kind of like a matter of probably just sort of, you know, loading, like kind of like doing one of those data loader, kind of self-service data loader data sets, just to kind of like take maybe like since we have the data through 2019, if you wanted to add in like the 2020, 2021 projects or something along those lines, you could just sort of supplement it that way, where you would just kind of drop in like the handful of projects that are within those more recent years as a data loader, kind of self-service uploaded point data set. That's probably the best route. But yeah, it is one of those cases where there is going to be some lag because we get this data from the federal source.
Gotcha. Okay, but so that answers the question, that if we want to manipulate something a little bit, we can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. What about the rest of the group? We have some pretty tech savvy people here and some data people. Any questions from anyone, or is it the presentation just that good?
I think it's just, sorry, this is Glenn speaking. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, and I appreciate that. Thank you for the demonstration, Brian. And just going to be jumping in here. And I think my question would be is like, if we get into this and we start exploring some of the stuff you've showed us and we run into some issues, can we, who do we need to email, or how, what are our means to follow up if we run into a snag or need some assistance?
Yeah, so we have a from this support page, there are like guides and stuff like that, but then there is a contact button, so that that goes to sort of to our general support team. There's a couple of my colleagues who manage and sort of respond to questions that come in through here, as well as you can also email just sort of the support@policymap.com email address. Those are kind of the two kind of primary avenues in which to just sort of get like general questions. And then I know that I had mentioned this to Kim, but as part of the premium subscription for Bloomington, there's also some custom data loading as sort of like an add-on service that we can do. So if like, if there would be like if there's like some data set that would be of value to the city of Bloomington users, we could upload it into PolicyMap and make it available just to the users on your subscription. So that could be something like, like local zoning data or something along those lines could be an example of that type of thing. Or, again, just sort of some data that would be particularly relevant to your use of the tool.
And then Brian, go ahead. So I noticed, I remember you saying that there was a limitation on 5,000 entities in terms of uploading. So what happens if, like, let's say you have something that, and again, I don't think we'll ever run into that, but let's say we had like 7,500 and they were of the same thing. Does the system just automatically know that I was trying to load more of the same thing? I mean, how would I combine that?
Yeah, you would end up having to kind of batch it. So you would have, basically kind of, and it would end up being split into like two data sets. So you would have, basically kind of like, batch A and batch B for that particular data set. We are increasing that limit. From what I've heard, we're increasing the limit of the self-service uploader batch to 10,000 records soon. So hopefully that would alleviate some of that. But for right now, you do have to just kind of like split it up into different batches. And then what you would see is, kind of two different data sets under your My Data menu once you've loaded it. So I would have like Bloomington projects,
right.
Batch A and batch B.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't know if it automatically combined them. If by some miracle, I mean, is that something that if we would really need it put into one, you guys could do that for us? Or is that not like if I was to load it up as batch A and batch B, but just for representation purposes so people didn't get confused, could you guys combine it into one for us? Taken after the fact?
Yeah, that could be something like that, for the custom data services, and that could be something we could do, like, because in addition to something like the zoning data or something along those lines, sometimes you just have people who want subscribers that just want to have like a large point data set. Maybe they've done like a yeah, they have like 50,000 loans or something. They just want to display it all as a single data set and have some filters on it. So that's another thing that we could use some of the custom data time to load that in.
Okay. No, perfect. I appreciate it. Like I said, I highly doubt we're going to run into that problem, but just double checking ahead of time. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And one final question, something IT asked, so if we give you data, it stays with just in our realm, right? It doesn't go into your batch of all the data points that you offer in general, correct?
No. Yeah. So it would end up being something that we would load with permissions for just the users on your subscription, and then it would be available through this My Data menu. It wouldn't be kind of like incorporated throughout PolicyMap data menus. This is kind of like, yeah, the stuff that's available to everybody is in here, and then the stuff that we kind of set with permissions, we would turn on for the users on your subscription through this My Data tab.
Okay, yeah, and internally we try to make sure we only mess with things that are publicly available anyway in that regard. So then when we print something, it's my understanding, I think from the contract, we just simply need to give PolicyMap credit if it's something that came from this.
Yeah, I think it's like, so there's within the print, there is the logos. I think it's like the terms are just basically like not removing logos. And I think there is some citing type of guidance up here. This link on the top right kind of gives some citing guidance and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay, yeah, and we're not, making money off it. It would be like a report to whatever commission or something.
Yeah, and that's totally acceptable use.
Awesome. Well, this is great. It was a great introduction. I appreciate it. And I know, like I said, like we mentioned, some staff have already dug in quite a bit. Does anyone have any final questions before we run out of time? I think we already did.
Yeah, it's a lot to cover.
I did have a question, but it just got answered actually. When you clicked that citing, I saw that we do have the option for embed, so we wouldn't have to, write our own code if there was something that we wanted to add to like a transparency portal or something like that down the line. So that's good to see. Yeah,
and that was something that I didn't really mention much, but so there is the ability to create embeddable maps. Like, so if you're just the only real limitation is that like it's only with data that's publicly available. But if you had like a data, some data set on the map and created a map with some public data, then you can use this the share button, which was below the print and the save, and there's this ability to create like embed maps. So that would be like if you wanted to embed, like kind of create a map of, with a data layer and then some data points on the map, and then incorporate it on a website, you could use this, and just gives you an iframe code.
Okay, and I assume that would still make it, within the iframe, it would still be interactive then, right? It wouldn't become a static map. Okay, perfect.
It's not, it's not static. Yeah, the print is more for your static maps, and then the embed is more for like, it will give you, it's a little bit of like a slimmed down version. Like they can't change though. It's like kind of locked into the particular map view. But they can pan around and the hover works and some of that stuff works. They can click on points.
Thank you.
Okay. Sounds like that's all the questions from us. Again, thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for the time. And I did, Kim, I think you may have joined after. I did record this, so I can share the link to the recording too, if that's something you wanted to share with anybody.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. Sorry, we had a meeting that ran over and I really apologize. But yes, recording is awesome. That way we can share it with other staff members that are still interested but not on this subscription list.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Well, thank you all for the time, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.